All right, hey, how you doing? This is Jesus Morel again. This is Broken Knuckles podcast, Ep-05, and today I want to talk about training concepts. Now, once again, I've said before, and I want to make sure that I just kind of make this clear, that there are a number of great tutorials out there, a number of videos that talk about how to do combos. They show you basic understanding on how to figure out your footsies and how to start to really understand the game. But no one really talks about how do you spend those actual minutes, right? You know what I mean? So if you're anything like me, you've probably gone to the training screen. It's like, all right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to practice said combo, and you start getting there and you're doing the combo and you're like, all right, well, I did the combo like 3 or 4 times. I feel really comfortable. All right, let me go jump online. Let's see how it works. And then you get your ass smashed because, you didn't think about practicing those anti-airs that always gets you stuck or those kind of things, right? So what I had to figure out was what's the best way for me to spend my time on doing this. And for a while there, I just couldn't really think of anything until one day it hit me. So personally, I've spent a couple of years training traditional Shotokan karate and taekwondo and those kind of things. And practice was fairly scheduled and regimented in the idea that you knew what you were going to do by what time it was. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's 15 minutes in the class, so warm-ups are done. We're going to be doing, the one steps and all that kind of stuff, So using that same basic idea, I started to really understand that, okay, there's probably a decent way to figure out how to spend this training time and all of that stuff, and it's not ever really talked about. So I want to talk about it here for two reasons. One, I'm working on this thing where, so where I live near where Combo Breaker is, and this is nearing the end of the year, and a lot of tournaments are ending, and I've personally never been to any tournament, I haven't been to a local or anything like that. I recently got good enough where I feel comfortable to the idea of entering a tournament. But it's just a long way to go, and I don't play as often as I need to, and blah blah, all these things. So I figure what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series. I've talked about it a couple of times. You might have seen it in the intro, but the series I'm basically going to call it the Zero to Hero, where I'm going to basically train and enter some locals. Hopefully, get some training time with various top level players, and then take all of that experience and go to a major, which would be Combo Breaker, and see how I do. You know what I mean? Like, make a serious attempt. Like, what I mean by that is, just to point this out, because it's kind of the reason for this podcast, is that, so when you go to practice and you're just practicing for practice sake, there's a certain level of intensity that you can muster out, because this is your daily routine. But now, as you start to get to a place of having a goal, I guess that's a good way to say that. It's like, all right, I'm going to go do this. Then your practice becomes more intensified because you have a goal and there's a thing that you can achieve, I guess. So with that being the case, you practice a little bit harder, and a lot of times we do that when it gets close, so we play all the time and like, oh man, I'm gonna go do that tournament in like a week or so, or a couple weeks, or whatever it is. And then you're like, all right, let me practice, let me think about this matchup, let me think about that matchup, who am I gonna see? But then you only really get a couple weeks of practicing, right? So for me, I'm figuring is like this. I had this idea for training. I'm going to take that training idea, which I'm going to talk about in this podcast. Ooh, excuse me. I'm going to talk about that training idea, and after that, I'm going to implement it with myself. Focus practice on achieving, but I call it a success if I can get out of pools at a major. I've never been to a major, so I should not get out of pools. I should go 0-2. right? Even if I generally keep playing at the current level, and even I kind of half-ass practice like we mostly do. But I think with this focus practice, I should be able to get out of pools. That's my main goal. Anything past that is, icing on the cake. All right, I'm gonna sneeze in 1 second. Maybe not. All right, I don't think I'm gonna sneeze. Oh, I think I got rid of it. Sometimes just talking about stuff makes it go away. Keep that in mind. Anyway, so shit, I lost track of what I was saying. Tournaments, my goal, personal goal, go to combo breaker, do well, get out of pools. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. Especially being my first major and all. All right, so anyway, so now let's talk about this training anyway. The whole reason why we're here, right? Okay, so one of the things I began to understand by going to Shotokan practice was that it was way more important that if you focused in class and absorbed everything you could, giving you a high quality time of training versus going all the time. And what I mean by that is in the beginning, when I was first starting to go into karate class, um, I had to pay for it myself. And I worked out a deal because this is before the times where you had $5 drop-ins and all that kind of nonsense. Like you paid for the month or you didn't. And I worked something out with the sensei where I can come in once in a while, but I didn't have to pay because I didn't have any money. But I was still only coming to like 1 or 2 classes every couple of weeks, so it wasn't the same. It wasn't the classic, 3 days of training a week. So with that being the case, all I could do is absorb as much as I could during my time, and then after that, work on those skills at home. And since I can only work on so much at home, I had to make sure I did everything with just as focused as possible so I can get the most out of it. So that's when I began to understand that the quality was way more important than the quantity. So then when I went back to class with, these guys who were just going to class, doing the thing because they're there all the time, my improvement was faster than theirs. Because, once again, I focused on the quality of the time that I was spending versus spending lots of time doing it because I didn't have lots of time. So, with that being the case, that let me understand that idea. Now, understand this. So, with that being the case for me, what I found quickly is that when I started going to tournaments, karate tournaments, back in the day, like the point tournaments and stuff were light to medium contact. But yeah, I was just destroying people in my rank level, I should say, and that was because, once again, quality over quantity. But then there was always these guys who were just dramatically better than me, and I realized now that they were dramatically better than me, not because of natural talent or anything like that, because I personally had natural talent. But what it really was that when quality of training is equal, then quantity matters, right? So I was able to understand the techniques and do all those things fairly quickly, but because they did the same quality of training but did it just more often, they were faster at achieving or faster at understanding the things. Or not to get too much into it, but I got beat by a couple of dudes who were just faster. It just felt like they was thinking faster than me, and that was more so because they practice more often, not so much better. But anyway, I digress. So that's the thing. Quality, improve the quality of your training, and then when it comes to the top level guys, you just have to train more often. Then it becomes repetitions. As long as you're doing the perfect repetitions, then it becomes more once you can get the quality up there. All right, so I want to talk about the actual time spending now, right? And we talked about that. And one of the ways to build the quality is to have a direct goal and to be focused. The better prepared you are before you start training, the better you can get out of your training time. It's just that simple. So with that being said, one of the things that I want to talk about are a good idea. Sometimes, damn it, what am I trying to say? just we're going to imagine that you have 1 hour to play. That's what I want to say. We're going to imagine you have 1 hour to play, and within that 1 hour, here are some ideas that I really suggest that you work on. And if you do these things that I am talking about within this hour, if that's your only hour, when you finally get a chance to play, you'll be dramatically better every time, right? Okay, so with that said, let's jump into it. So the first thing is, you go to class and you got to warm up. You do push-ups, the sit-ups, jumping jacks, run around the class, 10 punches, 10 kicks, boom, boom, all that kind of stuff, right? So taking that same basic idea is your basic skill building, right? That's basically what you do in the beginning. That's what warm-up is for. Build your basic conditioning and build your basic skill set, right? And you need to do the same thing like when you're training in your fighting game. So like, what are we talking about here? So footsies come from knowledge of how fast and how far a particular move goes. So then you'll know how to use it and to either whiff punish, or you'll know how to use it as an effective weapon because you know the range of it. So you learn that in the warm up. This is where you learn these things. So however works for you, but what's best is a static target, and then you go through your buttons. Like depending on the game you play will depend on whether you have command normals or not. But you work on. So let's say most games they have a separation between kicks and punches, or if you're thinking a weapon-based game or an anime game, I think they do too. They have a difference between horizontals and vertical strikes and kicks, right? So depending on how the buttons are separated, spend so like I said, we're gonna go for an hour. We're gonna look at about 15 minutes, right? And in that 15 minutes, you want to break that up either in 3 sections or 2 sections, depending on how the buttons are broken up in your game. And you're gonna spend 5 to 7 minutes working on looking at, feeling the speed and the distance of each one of those buttons in each of those sections. Now, how does that work for you? That's on you. However you feel the best way to spend that 5 to 7 minutes is up to you. But what I suggest is, I don't know, man. Just testing, just finding ways and finding a flow. You know what I mean? So not all games have dial a combo like Mortal Kombat does. But one of the things that I do like about that's how Mortal Kombat works, is that one, you know what the strings look like, and two, in training, it forces you to find which buttons they don't technically combo together, but they work well together. You hit, and this button puts you at -2. But when most people they want to use something, use their fastest button, generally a high, then you go to your another button, which is a little slower, and made even slower for the fact that you're negative, but because of what the button is, it makes all high buttons miss you, or something like that. Those things you find out in this beginning training time. So like I said, spend 5 to 7 minutes depending on how it's broken up, and you do skill building. Right now, after that, like in class, which is really a great way to do it, you do you start to drill the techniques. Now, drilling techniques should last. This should be the bulk of your time, right? You really should be. If you're thinking about spending an hour, you're going to drill techniques for a half of it, so about 30 minutes. A good way I suggest to do this is to figure out. So I'm using Mortal Kombat just as a base, 'cause that's the game I'm currently playing mostly. I find the bread and butter strings that lead into a very specific type of combo, either a combo that causes a bunch of damage with a knockdown, or a combo that allows me to get some corner carry, those kind of things, right? So you run those bread and butter combos, and then I always suggest that you have levels. So your bread and butter are actually going to be your easiest combos because you're going to use them all the time. And then have a combo that has a bit like chunky damage, but not doesn't have to be optimized. It's just a combo that you can pull off that gives you either more damage, or it burns a lot of time, or it does a bunch of corner cat, like something, a combo that has a specific purpose, right? And then you would train that one for a little while, and then end up always run through some super high level, mad difficult combo that you can't do. End up on that. And the reason behind that is by using drills that are progressively more difficult. What happens is you run the easy skills often, so they become actually second nature. Those slightly more difficult skills, you begin to hit them more often because you practice them more. And those super mad difficult skills, just because you go through them, it improves everything else and increases the likelihood, of course, because practice, doing things over and over again, increases the likelihood that you can pull those big things off. And then understand this, there comes a time as your skill gets better that everything kind of moves down a level. You know what I mean? All of those bread and butter combos, you don't even got to practice them anymore. Some might wind up falling into your skill building time because they're just so second nature. Now you're doing the intermediate stuff as your basic level, the advanced stuff as your moderate level, and then you just find like you use that other time for pure creativity. By the time you get to your advanced stuff as your moderate level, the last level is creativity, because you want to move to that place. What was how that shit say in Afro Samurai? Um, Basically, you want to get to that place where you're just your moves are coming from another place. You're just moving instinctually through the game, right? So anyway, you're gonna drill that, and like I said, you're gonna break it down to about 30 minutes. So however you break those skills down, maybe 10 minutes on basics, 10 minutes on moderate, 10 minutes on advanced. I personally say 15 minutes on basics. Give yourself 10 minutes on moderate and 5 minutes on advanced, because advanced skills is just like I said, it's the last thing to really concern yourself with. And then when you get to a place where technically you could take all of this training stuff and throw it out the window, you're still going to want to use it because it's good for you. Anyway, just nothing. So now the last 15 minutes, you got 15 minutes left. What I really strongly suggest you do, and a lot of people scoff at this idea, which I always found interesting, why they say this doesn't help. But for myself, having done it, I find it helps dramatically. Is you want to do some sparring in those last 15 minutes. Every single time when I go through and I do some training and I do it like I want, like I'm just laid out, and I end up with sparring, and sparring being you turn the opponent on AI, crank it up to the highest difficulty, and you just play for 15 minutes. It's just going to be 15 minutes straight of going through and all that stuff. Now, this is why I find this to be useful. So a lot of times people talk about the AI. All this basically doing is mimicking what you're doing. So whatever you're doing, it's going to do whatever is basically the counter to that, to get you used to dealing with those things. All right, fine. It's not intuitive. It's not playing on its own. But that's not what sparring is about. Sparring is about you practicing on you. You understand what I'm saying? So you've just trained all these things. You're just doing all these things. Now you turn the AI on, crank it all the way up, and then you just practice you doing you. Because what's going to happen is the AI is going to pull out some really advanced combos. It's going to whiff punish you properly. It's going to do all the things accordingly to your mistakes. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for where you're fucking up. You're not looking about, well, I'm training against this character, so I want to see how this character plays. You're going to get that intuitively just by the stuff that the AI is going to do, because people aren't going to play like the AI. People are actually, to me, way easier than the AI, because people are going to do, like, if the character has, just being real generic here, if the character has 10 moves, I find on average The basic player does 3 of those 10 moves, and a moderate player will do up to 5 to 7 of those 10 moves, and a really advanced player will use 9 of the 10 moves. Even when I watch tournaments of the top level players, I never see them use 10 of 10 moves. It's just not how it works. AI does 10 of 10 moves. Now, the beautiful thing about that also is it allows you to see the wide variety of moves that the other character has, and which prepares you for more types of people, right? Because you know what the moves look like. Humans have a way of acting, and that's a totally different thing to train for. We're just talking about training for how to play the game in particular. You see what I'm saying? So sparring is fantastic because you get to see the moves of the game, you know what they look like, you can get a feel what you can't do, and all those kind of things. So when you finally do play a person, if you've spent time sparring that character, you're not going to be much that they are going to do that you haven't seen before. What you won't have seen is how does the human utilize that particular tool. So, all right. So now that's basically how I suggest you run your training. You know what I mean? Start off with some skill building, do some drilling techniques, end up with some sparring against the AI, and then you're done. And then personally, what I generally do after I do all that, even though I tend to not have a lot of time, I'll jump online. Like I said, I'm currently playing MK, so with the Combat League, you play 5 matches, to get the daily blah, 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 whatever nonsense. So I'll do that, or come try to do that, depending on how much time I have, which generally takes me about another 30 minutes, depending on how many matches I get, how well I do, 30 to 45 minutes, then I'm done. And yeah, and that'll be the time I'll get to play. So, yeah. All right, I need to cut this shit out, all of this extra thinking shit. So anyway, so with that being said, I find that to be a great way to run a practice, especially if you're very limited on time. And one more thing I want you guys to think about, right? So your last match is the last match, right? Meaning every match you play between now and the last time you touch whatever game is simply preparing you for the next match that you're going to play. Meaning, if you keep in mind that you're always training, you're always trying to get better, even when you're in a tournament in the grand finals and it is the last possible set, every game is training for the next game. You're learning how to deal with that level of pressure. You're learning how to deal with that level of pressure, and your opponent is playing at their highest possible level. Everything is always an opportunity to learn more about that situation for the next time you get into that situation. So it's always good to kind of keep that in mind. You're always training, so even if you take a loss now, that's fine. You're going to have another match. There's going to be another time, and you learn from that last loss, right? So that's the biggest thing to keep in mind, that every loss is just a bit of training, and you learn something, and you learn what you need to improve on, or you learn where your limits are. All right? So, yeah, I'm going to wrap that up. I think that's good. That's about it. Thank you once again for listening to Broken Knuckles. This is Jesus, that podcast we talked about training concepts, blah, 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 all that good stuff. So, yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe down below. If you're listening to this on Facebook or watching it on listening to it on a podcast, watching it on Facebook, whatever, yeah, just please leave a like or whatever. I just need to know that you guys are feeling what I'm saying. Anyway, once again, thank you very much. This was Broken Knuckles, and have a great day. Bye.